The Great Gatsby, written by F. Scott Fitzgerald in 1925, follows Nick Carraway, a vet of World War I, and he moves to Long Island, New York from Minnesota. A graduate of Yale, he ends up working in finance in the city and renting a house next to the elusive and infamous Jay Gatsby the summer of 1925. Gatsby is famous for throwing the over-top parties, and all the bright young things attend accordingly. He then goes to the more posh part of town, East Egg, and to visit his cousin Daisy, who's married to a fellow alumnus of Yale, her husband Tom, a former football player. Tom is quick to reveal he has a mistress named Myrtle Wilson. At Daisy and Tom's, he meets a female golfer named Jordan Baker, who Nick ends up having a summer fling with. Nick declares himself one of the only honest men he knows. Tom eventually wrangles Nick and Myrtle to have a less than desirable party in the city, and Nick quickly sees the ugly side of Tom when he hits Myrtle in the face for overstepping herself. As the summer goes on, Nick finally gets invited to Gatsby's house by a personal invitation, only to realize that he's been a pawn in his innocent game to get Daisy, who turns out that they've known each other for years and were once madly in love. But only now Gatsby has the wealth he needed to accrue to win her back. The Long Island crew grows increasingly curious about how Gatsby has obtained his wealth. He keeps his cards very close to his chest. The summer continues as Daisy and Gatsby rekindle their love, and Nick covers for him. But as Tom becomes increasingly aware of the amount of time that they spend together, she and Gatsby, his jealousy fuels his rage. Tom digs deeper to find out more dirt on Gatsby and how exactly he obtained his wealth, as it was looked down upon to earn money via bootlegging or on the black market. On a grueling hot summer day, the crew is getting intoxicated, and in a drunken car ride, as luck would have it, Myrtle gets struck by Gatsby's car, but only later does Nick find out it was Daisy who in fact was driving. As everyone covers for Daisy, Myrtle's husband, driven with grief and revenge, shoots Gatsby, leaving him for dead. Nick is left to arrange the funeral, only to realize that all of these partygoers and friends were nothing but superficial flakes in the end, and poor Gatsby may have had to pretend to be one of them, but it turns out he was one of the more genuine people out of the crew. He was surrounded by only a few at the end of his tragic and short tale. The next book I read is the modern version of The Great Gatsby called Great by Sarah Benincasa. It follows the story of Naomi Rye in modern-day Hamptons of Long Island, New York, where New York's elite go for weekends and summers. Naomi is a product of two divorced parents, and her father has main custody of her in her down-to-earth, humble upbringing in Chicago, but she spends her summers with her awful, opposite mother, a cupcake mogul who hit it big with TV shows and cookbooks. She spends her summers in the Hamptons and her mother tries to control Naomi's life, and most importantly, her appearance. Since Naomi spends her summers there, she's formed forced relationships with her mother's friends, one being Delilah, an aspiring model who dates a former child star named Teddy. Although Naomi wants to hate Delilah because she's beautiful and has everything, she can't because she's a genuinely nice person. When they are reunited, they all go for lunch, and Naomi discovers that Teddy is cheating on Delilah with a waitress named Misty. Misty dates a manager at the restaurant they work in, and the rich kids are all going there all the time to eat with their parents, or by themselves, and they serve alcohol. Naomi is introduced to Jeff, one of Teddy's friends, and they have a summer fling. Naomi's next-door neighbor has been throwing elaborate over-the-top parties and personally invites Naomi, only to find out that the owner of the house is the elusive Jacinta Trimalchio, who hides behind her secret fashion blog, which everyone is obsessed with. Naomi becomes fascinated with Jacinta and soon realizes that she's been a pawn in her game to get to Delilah, whom she discovers has had a past with. When Jacinta and Delilah reunite, it's clear that they have a very deep connection and are in love. Teddy becomes increasingly jealous of the time his girl spends with Jacinta and starts digging into Jacinta's past to find out exactly who the heck she is and why does she have all this money at 18. Teddy reveals to Jacinta who isn't who she says she is, and her father was involved in an illegal arms trade, and her family was ostracized from the rich New York City community. But she's now come back, hoping that no one would remember her. In a drunken gathering during the confrontation, Delilah and Jacinta drive off. As luck would have it, Misty gets struck by Jacinta's car, but it was Delilah who was driving. Delilah lets Jacinta take the fall, and instead of jail, Jacinta does a blog post confessing the truth and ends up killing herself. The story ends with Naomi posting the truth and letting the whole world know that her friend wasn't a fraud. There are a lot of themes in these books, but just to pick a few, the ones that really took away from me. that in Great Gatsby include all the ideas that the American dream, the wealth, the glitz can't exactly get you what you want. Being among a certain social class and around the socially elite sets apart those with strong moral character and those who are grounded. Naomi and Nick are more grounded and set apart from the party scene of the socially elite. The reader is able to identify with them more than the others. They represent humility. Morality is a huge theme, piggybacking off of that theme throughout these books. Both characters are looking to stay true to their moral compasses, but still be socially acceptable until it comes to the point where deaths are involved, and the only thing to do is to walk away from these horrible tragedies. Love is a huge theme. Although in Gatsby, it's between a man and a woman, and in Great, it's between a woman and a woman, which personally for me didn't distract from the love part. I just saw it as they were both equal in their own right. I don't think that was a part in the book that made it immoral or had to do with anything like that, just from my personal background. But the overall theme of how love looks and how it is obtained is challenged. And ideas for teaching diverse learners. Although these books focus on the top 1%, which is miles away from most people's reality, both books do center on the white socially elite class. And it's no doubt going to be difficult text to get young adults to connect with on a personal level. During guided reading of these texts in the classroom and using the characters and setting as a microcosm for the themes will empower teachers and students throughout these texts. The text can also be used as a compare and contrast to social personas of today and the Jazz Age. Weaving in social studies and making the times relevant to history can anchor the text as well. Looking at the text as a post-World War I reflection can highlight important historical context. It may not be one of those texts you read that you can deeply connect with on a surface level, like that's me in the text, I can learn from that person, but the themes are very deep and can draw out a lot of support why Gatsby is worth reading in today's age. I did find that, of course, Gatsby is the original and is like the deeper connecting book, whereas like this is much more fluffy and easier to read, but it does definitely mirror what's going on here. I'd be interested to see if somebody could, from the Black community or a different kind of community, could cover the same stories and themes within their community and have that adaptation. In regards to controversial themes, they could involve the amount of partying and boozing going on under and over the age of 21 in both books. It was not very socially acceptable, but was a product of prohibition, economic boom, post-war, and that can be delved into from a social studies and psychological lens. Infidelity is also a controversial issue in both of the books. Its seemingly laissez-faire attitude that the rich people have towards it and the effects that it has on people played a huge role. These parts in the book prep young minds for a commonly socially unacceptable behavior, which they probably, unfortunately, will encounter at some point in their lives. Exposure to commonly accepted bad parenting, even though they have lots of money, is very controversial. Just because these people have money doesn't mean that their parents are perfect, and it turns out that their parents are actually awful and not monitoring them at all. Murder and suicide, of course, is a huge topic, and these being the absolute final end and to both of these stories, and playing off of how people are just not telling the truth and maybe not being the answer, of course, to murder or kill yourself over something like this won't solve your problems. Some people, like I said before, may find the fact that the girls are lesbians and great to be controversial as well, but it's important to have exposure to lots of types of relationships for young minds to learn about, to then be accepting of them, of course.